never again. When I'm out, I'm out. No more law, no more corporate, anything. None of this ever again for the rest of my life. That's the thought I had on Thursday night. Sat at my desk at about 9 p.m. It's Saturday now, and it hasn't gone anywhere, which is why I'm recording this episode instead of the one I planned. 4 nights past 9 o'clock at night at the desk. Teams pinging me constantly. Everybody needed an answer from me specifically right there and then rather than the next morning. To be honest, nothing too unusual about any of that, which is sort of the point. It's a normal bad week in a job like mine. By Friday evening, there was nothing left in the tank at all. At the time, I didn't think much of the thought. Everybody who has ever had a job has had the same one, usually somewhere around the third late night in a week. You have it. You go to bed. By Tuesday, it's gone. This one hasn't gone. And sat here now with a little bit of distance on the week, I recognize it. That exact thought, with exactly that much certainty attached, which I last had about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I acted on it, and it cost me pretty much everything I'd saved up to that point. So this is check-in 3, pillar 3, end of identity month. And it's the one where I finally tell you what happened the last time I felt like this, which is a story I've been dodging on this show for a while now. Thanks for listening to Life After Enough, a podcast about money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. If this episode made you rethink your future, share it with someone who's starting to question the script too. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Nick, and I'll see you next week as we keep building a life that's truly ours. Let's rewind to August 2016, when I walked out of corporate life for the first time. You know the outline because I've mentioned it plenty of times on the show so far. I quit law, I started an adventure fitness business, I ran out of money, and went straight back into law. What I haven't told you is why I really left. So let's start with that. 3 months before I handed in my notice, I was on Denali in Alaska. It was May 2016. I've talked about the trip before, so I won't do the whole thing again, but 2 bits of it really matter here. The training was the first time in my adult life I put something that wasn't work at the front of the queue. And the mountain itself, the weather, the danger, the sheer physical misery of it, rearranged me in ways I'm still living off. I came off that mountain feeling free, genuinely free, probably for the first time since I was 22. And then I did something with that feeling. I decided that if that's what being alive felt like, I should make it my living. That's the bit I've never said out loud on here. Denali wasn't something I did before I quit. It was the reason I quit. The timing all helped as well. I'd just paid off my student debt. First time in my adult life I owed nobody anything, and there was a bit of money left over afterwards. Not much, but it was the first money I'd ever had that wasn't already spoken for, and I was desperate to get out. That's the honest word. This wasn't me being restless or curious. I was absolutely desperate. The sensible version was available to me. Build the thing at the weekends, keep the salary coming in, find out whether anyone actually wanted it before betting the house. Now I can see that option perfectly clearly. Back then, in my all or nothing thinking style, it was a cliff edge and I did a running jump. And here's what makes me laugh now. I started an adventure fitness business, having never run a single fitness session in my life. Not even one. Not a taster for a friend in a park on a Saturday. Nothing. I had a spreadsheet and a ton of enthusiasm. If you'd asked me at the time, I'd have said I was backing myself. Looking back, I think I just didn't want to check in case the answer was no. For years, I told the failure as a story about execution. Bad timing, one disaster of a retreat, money going out faster than it came in. All true, but there was something underneath it that took me a lot longer to admit. I didn't love fitness, I quite liked it. The fitness was the engine, though. It's what made the whole thing work as a business. What I loved was the adventures. And when I eventually asked myself why the adventures had such a hold on me, the answer wasn't flattering. From where I'm looking now, I can see it more clearly. My adventures were as far away from a corporate desk as it was physically possible to get. And that was the whole appeal. I told myself I'd found my calling, and I believed it completely. So the lesson, which cost me a couple of years and all my savings, what I felt on that mountain was real. What I got wrong, though, was what I did with it. I took the most alive I'd ever felt and treated it like a business plan. And what I actually needed was rest. When you catch yourself wanting the exact opposite of your life, all of it, the total inversion, that's usually not a calling. That's usually just being knackered. It doesn't feel like being knackered. It feels like clarity. And that's the really difficult part. People here ran out of money and picture something dramatic and quick. But for me, it wasn't. It actually took 2.5 years to come full circle. And most of that was the slow bit. In May 2017, I put on the fitness retreat. If you've heard me mention a retreat that went badly, that's the one. It lost real money and it took the wind out of the whole project. So I started consulting on the side, lawyering again, taking on bits and pieces to keep everything going, which meant for the next 1.5 years, I was 2 people. Adventure Nick in public, Lawyer Nick in the background paying for it. The thing I'd sworn I'd finished was the only reason the lights stayed on. I was doing the sums every month and I was getting the same answer. This doesn't last forever, and when it stops, I'm the one who has to fix it. Nobody was going to come and rescue me. It was a mess of my own making, which is the phrase I've always used privately, and I'll say it openly now for you all to hear. I'd been so desperate to leave that I never seriously worked out what happens if it doesn't work out. Now, before this gets gloomier than it deserves, some of those years were the best of my life, and I want that on record too. I got to go on amazing adventures. I got to be outside in places I'd never seen from behind a desk. Skint, but outside. I don't regret a minute of it, and if you gave me the choice again, I'd probably still go and do it all over again. Quick one before we continue. I send a weekly email every Monday morning that goes deeper than the podcast. It's not a recap, it's a separate idea, usually something more personal, plus a question to sit with for the week. It's free, it's one email, and you can sign up at lifeafterenough.com. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to it. The end of it was magical and transformational extended stay in Bali, the last 3 months of 2018, working as a digital nomad lawyer, which sounds like the dream, but was in fact the dream running out. And I can see the funny side now. I'd left law to get away from a desk, and there I was at the end of it all, doing law on a laptop in a place the fantasy version of me would absolutely have chosen. I knew, sitting there, that it was almost over and the road led me back to London and to, quote, get a proper job. Then it didn't. Complete twist of fate, Singapore came up and I landed here, started building a practice inside a law firm, and that's when the rebuild started. I didn't just go back and get a job. I came back and attached myself to earning harder than I'd ever been attached to anything. The income, the savings rate, and then later the number, the runway, the date, the whole machine. And running underneath all of that was one sentence. Never again. Never again would I fail. That's the kind of armour I built over this Singapore chapter. It didn't appear by accident. I built it on purpose, out of that period from 2016, so I'd never be caught out like that again a second time. And to be perfectly honest, it worked. It worked so well, though, that 8 years since moving to Singapore, I've got the portfolio and the date in the diary, and I still can't get the armour off. I've never once cared about being a lawyer. But I care enormously about being someone who earns and is able to provide for those who I love. Those are different things, and it took me most of a decade to separate them. Last episode, I said there were 2 voices arguing against leaving, and that I was only dealing with the first one. The first one says you're wasting something rare. I had a go at that one, and I think I got somewhere. Then I said that there was a second one I wasn't ready to open, and that it would get its own episode. So here it is. The second voice is softer. And it doesn't really argue. It just points at 2016 and says, you've had this feeling before. You called it a calling then as well. Remember how that went? Prepping for the show this month, the thing I worked out was that I've had the fear slightly wrong for years. I assumed I was frightened of the next thing failing. I'm not. What I'm actually frightened of is that I can't trust my own wanting. Last time, the wanting was a symptom rather than the signal. So when Thursday night rolls around and the "I never want to do this again" thought arrives feeling completely true, I no longer know whether to believe myself, which is a strange thing to say out loud about your own head. There's also the small matter of being 10 years older than the man who did it the last time. Younger Nick had the energy for it, and frankly, he had the ignorance, which helps enormously. I'm not certain I've got a second rebuild in me if I needed to do it. So that's the doubt. Here's the other side of it, though. This time, there is a floor under me, a cash buffer measured in years rather than months, a portfolio doing its job, and an exit with a date and a plan attached rather than a leap and a hope. And the big one, I'm building the next chapter now, while the salary is still arriving. It's half killing me fitting it all in, but given my previous experience, it's absolutely worth the extra effort I'm putting in. The exact thing I refused to do in 2016. Trying things, getting some of them wrong, finding out while being wrong is still cheap. Back then, I had no concept of runway, no idea what the business needed to survive, and I'd never heard of fire. I assumed it would just sort itself out, and that if it didn't, I could always be a lawyer again. Which, to be fair to me, is exactly what happened. So the money question is genuinely answered this time. What none of it tells me is whether Thursday night was pointing at something real or just telling me I need another holiday. No spreadsheet is ever going to settle that one. Rest might, and time probably will, and that's a fair bit of what this final year is for. When I walk out at my planned exit next year, it will be the first time since university, apart from those business years, that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. My track record with open space is not spotless. The only other time I had any, I filled it almost immediately with the loudest opposite of my life I could find. So I'm watching myself a bit on this one. The fear I have is being a waster. The guy whose entire personality is that he used to be a lawyer and then he quit. Still dining out on one decision years later. There's also a second version I worry about as well, which is turning into an absolute miser. That I turn into the guy who fusses over the portfolio endlessly and checks the drawdown on a Tuesday morning for no reason whatsoever. I can see both from here, which is why I'm saying them out loud. A job lands you a pile of things you never asked for. Somewhere to be. People who noticed if you weren't there, and that thing I was moaning about before being needed, which actually, as it turns out, does a lot of the work for your identity. All of that leaves when the job does, and none of it comes back on its own. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I'm planning to put in that space just yet. Because partly that's a conversation for another month, and partly because filling it too quickly is precisely the mistake I made last time. So it's very much a work in progress. Quick pause. If this episode is sparking something for you, hit follow so you don't miss what's coming next. Feel free to share it with someone who'd love it too. It really helps the show to grow. There is one question sitting under all of it, though, that I've been swerving for the past 3 episodes. There's been a path telling me what to do my whole adult life. Know the next step, do it well, get rewarded, repeat. 20 years of that would make anyone feel capable. So how much of my confidence is actually mine? And how much of it is just the path that I've been on? I'd quite like to find out, which I think is a good sign. Right, so status. Pillar 3, identity, after a month of living it. I think the status is work to do. Including this one, I've made 4 episodes about identity. I've named the second payslip, the competence thing, the guilt, and now the armour. Here's what I can report back about naming things. It doesn't get rid of them. I know exactly what my armour is made of. The urge to run turned up in the middle of the month I was making episodes about the urge to run. 2 things did move, though. The first is that I'm doing far less cliff edge thinking than I was a few months ago. It's a little calmer inside my head. And the second one is better. 10 years ago, that same feeling arrived and I read it as a calling and I handed my notice in within months. This week, it arrived again and I went to bed. And by Saturday morning, I was reading it as a warning light instead. That's the whole difference. It doesn't sound like much when I say it out loud like that, but it's been 10 expensive years turning into one small pause, and I'll take that. So to be honest with you, I'm starting to feel the familiar warning signs of getting burnt out. 4 late nights, a ton of stress, no time that's mine, and a fantasy life that's got very loud about the opposite of everything. Last time I obeyed that feeling more or less on the spot. This time the plan is the thing I skipped in 2016, which is a proper rest first. I'm also absolutely determined that my identity does not become he quit law once. One decision isn't a personality, however good it looks from the outside. Whatever comes next has to be far wider than the exit. I've got one more admission for you as well. This one's a little weird. I'm not excited about the exit at the moment, not in the way you'd assume someone would be, having spent a decade working towards it. When I picture next June, I don't get a bubbling feeling in my tummy. I get something a bit flatter than that. I think I'm going to walk out the building for the last time and just exhale. And there's a bit of me that finds that a little sad because I've rebuilt my whole adult life around this exit. Although the more I say it out loud, the less sure I am that it's the wrong reaction. 10 years of holding your breath and the first thing you do is to put it down. That might be exactly right. It just isn't in the version anyone puts on an Instagram reel. I think there could be 2 explanations for this, and I can't tell at the moment which is true. Either work has eaten all of the space where the excitement would live, or my brain is keeping the whole thing at arm's length on purpose because it's still a little too far out. It might be both. I just don't know at the moment. But here's what tells me the excitement isn't actually gone, but maybe just buried. There is one part of all of this I can picture now in high definition, and it's the summer afterwards. Me and my husband going to Canada for a long summer trip. First stop is Tofino on Vancouver Island, which is somewhere near the top of my list of favorite places on earth. A little town, enormous beaches, cold water surfing, very good food, and about as remote as you can get. There's a place up the coast from there called Hot Springs Cove. Tofino has Restore written all over it. A week there, then drive over to Vancouver, across to Banff and Jasper, and then keep going north. High alpine hiking, lakes to swim in, maybe a bit of mountaineering if the legs are willing, no timetable and nowhere to be, just us. And that, by the way, is the rest. It isn't a holiday I'm tacking on the end. It's the thing I skipped in 2016, finally getting done in the right order. So when I picture that, I feel plenty, which means the problem isn't that the excitement has died. It's just at the minute I can only reach it by looking past the exit rather than at the exit itself. So here's what I'd like you to do this month. Most of us built something after the last time things went badly. Some rule, some habit, some way of arranging your life so that a particular thing can never happen to you again. Mine was earning because I ran out of money before. I know precisely when it went on and precisely what it's made of. So 2 questions. What's yours? And is it still doing a job or is it still on? Because that's where I've ended up after this month. I can describe my armour in detail. I can tell you the year, the reason, what it protected me from, and what it cost. And I still can't take it off. Understanding the thing and being able to take it off turn out to be 2 completely separate projects, and I've only finished the first one. Next month is Pillar 4, relationships. Who am I to the people around me once the job goes, which frightens me in a completely different way. I'll get to that in August. And if you want to know which of the 5 pillars is actually holding you up, and after this month I can tell you it's rarely the one you'd guess, the Freedom Score is a free 3-minute quiz that'll tell you. The link is in the description. Go and have a go. Thanks for listening to Life After Enough, a podcast about money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. If this episode made you rethink your future, share it with someone who's starting to question the script too. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Nick, and I'll see you next week as we keep building a life that's truly ours.